People, welcome. This is the Anyone Can Farm Experience live chat Tuesday night edition. It is June 11th, 2024. I'm Mark, your host, coming to you from Baker's Green Acres in lovely Marion, Michigan. In this show, we like to talk about small farms, homesteading, and just plain living. And I got something to talk about tonight. All right, Keith is with us. Right on. Hey, man, I made big gains with my crew with the stuff that you gave to me. 2 phone poles and some PVC pipe. We got our drain in. We got our tank set. I'm making big gains here. Big gains for the overhang, we call it. And we'll be using that on Tribe Day. Tribe Day is coming up. Tribe Day is going to be, I'm not sure when that is. It is the weekend after the 4th of July. So let's see. It is the 12th through the 14th. So Tribe Day is a day when we open up the farm to people who want to come and camp and hang out with us, use our campground. And then we bring people in from the tribe and let them share their experiences and their expertises. So there's a lot of people in the tribe that have gotten pretty good at things, and they're willing to come and share those things. So it's almost like we have blocks during the day. So we have 2 blocks before lunch on Saturday and 2 blocks after lunch. And then we have various things going on. So you can attend those, or you can just wander around and see what's going on here, or talk with your friends, or make new friends, or sit around the campfire, or eat. You know, it's just a relaxing weekend. And so far, we've just had nothing but fun with it. Last year, we had a little bit of rain, and I wasn't on top of things, and we ran out of pulled pork. My fault. I wasn't on. That's not going to happen this year. We're going to nail that down. So I guess tonight's show is brought to you by Tribe Plus. Tribe Plus members will be getting in at a reduced rate. If you're not a Tribe Plus member, we're going to soak you for it. So join Tribe Plus and you get in cheaper. And you get to hang out with the big boys. The big boys. So I know that these shows are reaching lots and lots of people now. Don't know why. Exactly, but it's just happening. And so I want to tell you a little bit about what we do here. We've been at this property, my wife and I and our kids have been here since 2004, when I retired from the United States Air Force. I came here and wanted to set up a little homestead farm type thing. I wanted to work with my wife and my kids. I didn't want to be working off all the time and then only seeing them, you know, for brief periods like it kind of was when I was in the military. And so that's what we set out doing. And we didn't really know much about this looking back on it. We thought we did, but we really didn't. And the way it's evolved, every year things change, and we have a pretty solid direction that we're going in right now. For a lot of years, we thought, or I thought, I'd like to do one thing, a lot of one thing, so I can focus on it, do it really good. But it turns out that you don't utilize all the assets that are available to you, right? So just a little example, if you have a chicken processing business that you do once a week, and you're processing a couple hundred chickens a week of other people around, you wind up with heads, feet, guts, and feathers. And those could be a real liability if you have to get rid of that stuff. Like, what do you do with it? But if you have pigs, it becomes an asset. So not only am I processing chickens for people and they're paying me to do it, I'm actually feeding my pigs for a day. So those things go together. They go together. Whereas if we just had pigs, well, then we have to struggle with the feed bill all the time. See, so things go together. It makes a lot of sense for us to be diversified and have all these facets that we do. Not a whole lot of one thing, because then you wind up with pollution issues actually, and you have to deal with that. Whereas if we're just doing, a fair number of everything, some things more than others because they're once you're set up, they're easier to do. And so that's where we're at. We do beef, pork, chicken, pastured poultry. We also have a big laying flock too, so we have eggs. And then we milk some cows. 5 cows, and that's turned a cool thing. The milk brings people to the farm to get their share of the cow. We do herd shares. And while they're here, they buy chickens and maybe ground beef or steaks or pork sausage or pork chops or, so we have a little store set up where people can stop in and they can grab what they want and go. And we've got kind of a nice little herd of people who are doing business with us, and we can depend on their business, and that makes the farm kind of move along. So it's worked out pretty good, and we want to expand every operation to make it easier and more efficient, and I don't know, more elegant. Jill likes to use the word elegant, more elegant. So today, for instance, we were working on our new creamery. So it's connected to our milk parlor. That's where you milk the cows. The cows all come in, stick their heads through their stanchions. We lock them in and go to milking them. And when the milk is in the can, you have to then process that milk. And that sometimes processing that milk means you're just running it through a filter and put it in jars. And half-gallon jars is what we use. And then we take the jars and put those in a water bath and start cooling them down. And then when they get down to the water temperature or close to it, we'll put them in the chiller, which is a refrigerator, but we call it the chiller. And it's our house, so we can call it whatever we want. I got some skeeters in here. That one is gonna. Okay, so that, we do that, and we do a few other things. We grow some crops. We cut a lot of hay to support our beef cows and our milk cows. We are big time scroungers, so we scrounge a lot of feed for our pigs, and that works out really well. Let's see, we grow some mushrooms, just for our family mostly. I have not sold any mushrooms because we like mushrooms a lot, shiitakes. We have a big garden, so Jill cans tons of stuff, and we eat out of the garden, and we buy very little from the store. So the profits that we make on the farm go towards the bills of the farm, and then there is a nice profit at the end. So it's definitely doable. And then we run kind of a little educational thing on the side where we're more than willing to have people come on and we show them how to do these things, right? And that's been really successful because even if only one person took what we've shown them how to do and then did it, then that's a success right there. But we've had lots of people take what we show them how to do, and they've turned it into a business for themselves, and then they've built their confidence, and they go on and they do other things, and it just kind of grows. It grows. So sort of spreading love into the community like that is a good thing to do, and it's paid really well. It's paid, not just dollars. It does pay dollars, but it pays off in love dividends, I guess. When people can grow their own food, people like to do that. And these days, especially, there's security in having your own food supply for sure. So, but one of the other things that we do here is we are mechanically inclined. I've been a mechanic my whole life, welder, carpenter, plumber. None of these things am I actually, uh, well, I guess I am certified because I say I'm certified, but I was a mechanic in the Air Force, and I was a mechanic before then. I was working on airplanes. And before that, I worked on cars when I was a tender youth. I worked at a gas station, Paul's Amoco, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. I started there when I was 16. I stayed there till I was 18. And he taught me all kinds of, he was an old guy. He was like 26 years old. He taught me all kinds of things, how to change tires. And I was telling my wife today that he told me I had bought a car to kind of increase my coolness. I had a 66 Chevelle that was cool, but it was raggedy. And it was high performance, but the brakes didn't work too good. And, the interior was kind of hashed. And so I wanted to up my game, and I bought a 1970 Pontiac Le Mans. So that car was 7 years old when I bought it. I don't even remember how many miles it had on it, but it didn't have the pep that the Chevelle did. The Chevelle was an absolute animal. I bought it from a guy that had really hyped it up, and but it smelled like exhaust on the inside all the time, and it leaked a lot of oil, and it was beat up. It was beat up, but it was fast. But this car, the new one that I got, and I intended to sell the Chevelle, um, it was tired. And my boss showed me how to do a rebuild on the engine. And when I was done with that rebuild, I had a very dangerous piece of equipment on my hands. And I was telling Jill today we had to go to Cadillac for something, and I was telling her on the way back some of my escapades in that car. And if my father only knew, if he only knew, like he had no idea how much power those things had. And I'm lucky I didn't, get myself hurt with it. But that's where I started my career in trying to understand how things work and to be able to repair. So that's the title of the show tonight is repair. Repair. And I think this could probably fall into the category of perspective, could. But if you don't have the will to repair things, then you can't see it. You just can't see it. So when I was probably about 25, I got sent by the Air Force over to the Philippine Islands to do something. And I wound up spending a lot of time over there and got to know the people and got to cruise around quite a bit and see what goes on. And it's a lot different than the United States. A whole lot different. It's a very poor country, and the people have to make do with what they have. And they don't have much. They really don't have much. So my first night in the Philippines, we flew in there, and then because I was a low-ranking guy, they didn't have any place for me to stay on the base. So we had to go and stay downtown, which is an adventure in itself. So we got a cab downtown. It was me and a guy by the name of Jack Genge. I just talked to him about a month ago. And we got to the gate, walked out of the gate into the downtown area in the Philippines, and it was like, wow, it was like the Old West. And we got a jeepney, it's called. It was a Jeep that rolled by, and the guy said, "Do you want to ride?" And we just said, "Yeah." And so he got in this Jeep, and I quickly realized that this Jeep was probably about 40 years older than I was at the time. So it was one that was left there during World War II. It was an American Jeep, and they use them. So I don't know if this guy owned this or he worked for the owner of it, but this Jeep was old. And we noticed, as Air Force mechanics, we noticed how old this was and how they had made their own parts. They had repaired the seats, they'd recovered them, they'd painted, they'd put their own little finishing touches on this Jeep. But I'd say this Jeep, looking back on it, I have a Jeep now and I'm into Jeeps, was probably like a CJ2. And it was probably built in 1940 or 38, in that area. And had been left in the Philippines, and these guys just kept driving them. Now you just can't keep driving something that is that old unless you repair it. Now, how many of those do you see running around in the United States? Not many. And there was probably many, many, many more that were made available to the civilian population in the United States. And people got them, and then they'd drive them, they'd use them, and they'd wear out, and they'd go by the wayside. They'd wind up in junkyards, get melted down, made into other things. So what was the difference? Is it because we salt the roads here, or what is it? What is the difference? Well, where I live in the north, they do salt the roads. And I kind of wonder about that sometimes. Who does that benefit by putting salt on the roads? Us as the drivers, because it melts the ice, but it really does a number on metal, on steel, any ferrous metal. It melts it. I mean, it just rusts it bad. That's why they call where I live part of the Rust Belt, right? But cars don't last long here. Brand new cars that people are still making payments on are rusty. And then by the time they get them paid off, thing's not worth anything because it's rusty, or it's worth a lot less because it's rusty. And generally stuff rusts to the point where it's not usable anymore and it winds up going to the scrapyard. And that's kind of too bad. So, but I never forgot that whole time in my life when I was in the Philippines, and I would see the Filipino people using Jeeps and other cars that they would get from places, who knows where they came from, very old, but still running them safely and in really good repair. They took their time to repair them. Another thing that we saw a lot of over there was trikes, they call them. So they usually about a 100cc Honda, Kawasaki, or Suzuki motorcycle that they build a sidecar on it. And then it's got three wheels, so they call them trikes. And you can go any place on a trike, and extremely cheap. You two guys get in a trike, one guy in the sidecar and one guy sitting behind the driver, and sometimes there'd be two guys or three, depending on the situation, and they'll take you as far as you want to go, and you wind up giving them like not very much money. I don't remember exactly how much money you would take with you when you went out, but it was never more than $10. And that would be all your food, all your beverages, and your transportation, and various and sundry other things. And you were living large on $10, but you didn't take a bunch of money out with you because you could get rolled. And so if you got $100 on you, that'll set up a Filipino guy at that time for a year. So $100 is not something to take with you when you go downtown. So anyway, the takeaway from that was the equipment that we are using will last indefinitely if we need it to. So I came back from the Philippines, and then I got stationed at Loring Air Force Base in Maine. And the equipment that we were flying up there was B-52s, bombers, big plane, 8-engine airplane, and KC-135 tankers. Now, I didn't do much on the tankers at all. I did help pick one up that had crashed one time. I've told you that story, and that was a terrible story. But the bombers were very old. Some of them were built in the late 50s, right? And then they built them. I'm not sure how long they built them for, but we were still flying them. And that's because we repaired them. And I think when you start talking about repair, people get kind of, they go out there and they don't understand what repair means. And this all came back to me last week. I was helping one of my sons, Frank, work on a repair that he is doing to a motorcycle that has been in our family for 15 years. My second oldest son was the one that received it. He bought it from a friend of his, and that motorcycle was probably 10 years old then. It's a Yamaha 125. And Joe rode it and rode it and rode it until I think he got his driver's license. And then it went to my next son, Sam, and Sam rode it and rode it and rode it. And in that time, put tires on it, put wheel bearings into it, put new fenders on it, put new chain, new sprockets. I think we put a clutch in it, new cables. I mean, he's using it, constantly using it, and it's failing as you're using it. You know, it's like components on it are failing. Well, then after that, Keith used it. Keith was always hard on stuff, but Keith was also a mechanic at heart. And Keith wound up putting a new carburetor on it that I remember. He put a new seat on it. He tweaked the exhaust. Keith was a big exhaust tweaker. When he would buy a new vehicle, first thing he'd do is get the old Sawzall out, and off the muffler comes, so it would sound cool. He didn't do that, but he did change the rear of the muffler so it was louder. And he used it until he no longer needed it. He started driving, and then he was more, he was doing other things. So that motorcycle wound up getting parked until Jim was old enough. And then Jim rode it until it gave out. The top end of it gave out. And what that means is it just started smoking real bad, and then it wouldn't start. And when it did start, it had no power. And so it wound up getting put in the shed, and Jim got a different motorcycle. We got a hand-me-down from my son Joe, who had bought another motorcycle, a 225, that was bigger, and it fit Jim better. And Jim has rode that motorcycle a lot until he outgrew that. Now he's rebuilding it. He's doing repairs on it, and then it's probably going to get handed down to Frank. But right now, Frank is working on the 125. Excuse me, I'm getting bugged in here. Oh, that's why the door's open. And Frank and I were working on this. Frank had rebuilt the top end, so he had pulled the cylinder off, put a new piston in it, new rings, and a new cylinder went on. And then he put it back together, and then he hung it back on the frame, and it would start, but then it would die. And so I went down, I was looking it over, and I said, you got a carburetor problem. We're going to need to pull that carb off, and we'll have to look at it. So the carburetor came off, and we saw that there was a piece in there called the accelerator pump. There was actually a steel part that fits into an aluminum housing, and the steel had corroded in that aluminum housing, and we could not get it out. It wasn't in a good position to get out. Like, we couldn't get anything on it to pull it out. And we finally did pull it out. The housing was toast. It was just toast. It was really not usable. I suppose we could have drilled it out bigger and then got a bigger pump to go in it, but there's nothing like that available. Plus, the carburetor, we can buy the carburetor for $45, a brand new carb. So that's the option that we took. But as we were doing that, I could see Frank was kind of like, oh, I just rebuild this. Now I got to put a new carburetor on it. And you know, I could see him. So I needed to kind of talk to him about this and explain how maintenance works and what maintenance is all about. So I said to him, and I think I want to pass this on to you guys. I want to pass this on to you because here we have a motorcycle, a 125, that when it's running and this boy has it, it's the ultimate. Like, he wants for nothing else. Once he has that motorcycle running, he's got a smaller one now, a 100, that we did the top end on that too. But he needs a little bit bigger bike. You know, he's got to have a little bit bigger bike. And so he was a little bit crestfallen when we realized, hey, we need a new carburetor coming for this. And I could see him going, oh, yeah. So he said, well, let's just look at this for what it is. Okay. So there's an item called, on any piece of equipment, you can find what's called an illustrated parts breakdown. And that would be a milk separator. That would be a compressor. That would be a motorcycle. It would be a car. It would be a Jeep. It would be an airplane. There's an illustrated parts breakdown that when that item is produced, there's a picture of it that is drawn, so you can, and it's exploded. They call it exploded. So it's like all moved out. It's not together. It's all out. So you can see the individual parts. And then it's got a list. Number 1, bolt, 4 each, it will say. And then the next thing could be, let's say headlight, 1 each. Frame, 1 each. Rear wheel, 1 each. Front wheel, 1 each. Handlebars, 1 each. And so I said to him, now look at this illustrated parts breakdown. It's got every single part listed that when they're all together equals that motorcycle. But it is a compilation of 350 separate parts, 348 separate parts. And I said, let's just take a part here. Foot peg, right? And then I point to the foot peg on the motorcycle, and I said, look at that foot peg. That thing is 20 years old, but it's just as good as the day it was manufactured, except it's a little rounded off because so many kids' feet have been on it. It's a little rounded off, you know, and the paint is worn off of it. But it is completely usable, or we would say in the service, we used to call stuff serviceable. It's deemed serviceable, means it will work, right? So there's one part we don't have to change, and that was foot peg, right hand, 1 each. That one is serviceable, or we could call it 100%. Now, would we call it 100%? I think if it was an airplane, we wouldn't, because it is worn, the paint is off of it, and so it would be deemed to be 89%, right? But serviceable. So there were parts on B-52s that were old, and the paint was worn off, and they may have had a few scratches and things in them. and they may, inspection would say, well, that part is at 92%, but it's serviceable. So can we use it on the airplane? Oh yeah, we're going to use that on the airplane, right? So on Frank's bike, we started going through the parts, and we look at this frame on this motorcycle. This frame, if you clean this frame, let's say we had all the parts off and we cleaned that frame and took some 409 to it, you would not know that frame wasn't brand new, except for a couple scratches here and there, and I don't even see any dents on it. It just wasn't abused. This motorcycle was not abused. It was just ridden. So I said, well, we don't have to change that. And then I said, what do you think the most expensive part on this motorcycle is? Well, I don't know, probably the engine. And I said, yeah, but the engine is a subassembly. So that engine maybe cost, $600-700 new, but it is a compilation of parts. So let's just look at some of the parts on the engine. Side cover, one each. We take that side cover off. There's nothing wrong with this side cover. It's 20-something years old, but there's nothing wrong with it. It will still do the job. So is it serviceable? Yeah. So we started going through parts on this. And then he quickly realized that the majority of what is here right now in front of us is serviceable, the vast majority. So as I was sitting there, I was actually what they called a 7 level. So I was authorized to look at equipment and say, good, no good, and the younger airmen that worked for me, they relied on me to say that we're going to put this back in service because it's going to function, or we're not going to put this back in service, the assembly, because this component needs to be swapped out. This one component, and it could be, it could be anything. Usually, there's a subspecies, a subsect of equipment that is called consumables, right? So on a motorcycle, a good example of a consumable would be the chain. The chain's going round and round and round and round, and you got to oil it and you got to stay after it, but it's going to wear out anyway. It just is. And it's consumable. So if we were relying on this motorcycle for rescue or something like that, we would have a spare. We would have a spare on the shelf. And when you replace the chain, you replace the back sprocket and you replace the front sprocket because they wear together. And if you put a new chain on an old sprocket, you're setting up a bad situation, and you're going to have wear that's not going to be good, right? So we would replace the consumable parts at the same time. Another thing that would be, say, a consumable part would be like a throttle cable. So you've got the throttle up here, and there's a cable that goes down to an actuator on the carburetor. And when you twist the throttle, so you're constantly moving that cable, and that cable wears. It wears inside of the. Gary Rockwell just said he broke a section on his 70 International Harbor 99 hay mower today. Good thing parts are common, and I can get them at the local harbor. Right on. Hey, I'll get into that. I'll use that, Gary. That's good. That's really a good time that you put that in there, right? So that's a consumable part. We will, while we're looking it over and we see a cable that's functioning, but it's got some wear on it, and we know from experience that it doesn't have long to live, let's bring it up to 100%. We don't have to right now. It'll function without it, but let's bring it up to 100%. If nothing else, let's get it on the list of parts that we're going to order for this piece of equipment, right? And Gary's given me that comment right there, and that's kind of where I'm going to go. We use motorcycles on this farm as they're very essential for what we do. Like, we built the farm so that motorcycles can get places where you can't get with a car or a truck or a tractor. And the reason you don't want to go there is because it's wet, and you don't want anybody, oh, I think I'll drive a 3/4 ton truck down there and just see how deep that mud. We don't want that happening. So we kind of head those things off. And we know that because we've buried vehicles on this farm, and my neighbor Jack Van Drie has pulled me out of way too many places. As you may have remembered, Jack had this property for a while, and he got a tractor stuck on what we call the pig field when he was a young man. And the guy that owned this place that had to pull him out, Jack was renting it from him, I suppose. And the man said to Jack, "You damn fool. I don't even go in there with my mules." Right? So this place was farmed many years ago with horses, and then mules became more, more usable for a lot of people. Because to farm with horses, you got to have some smarts. You got to know what you're doing. You have to have experience with horses. Where mules, yeah, you got to have experience, but they're less likely to participate in heroics that people get killed. Right? They're more likely to say, "I'm not going," than with horses. They will say, "I'm going, and you can't stop me." Right? I'm not up for farming with horses. I'll just tell you that right now. So anyway, when you understand this, when you look at a piece of equipment, whether it's a motorcycle or a hay mower, a tractor, you want to be looking at it as what are the implications here as far as repair goes. That's what you want to look at. You may be looking at the sleekest, John Deere brand new thing and say, "Oh, I would look so cool out on the field with that." Yeah, you look pretty cool until you got the hood up and you're on your cell phone calling John Deere to have a technician come out and fix it for you. And a lot of the fixes these days, people, I'm telling you, are done with a laptop, and you can't do it. They make it that way so that the John Deere dealership, I shouldn't pick on those guys. I do business there because I have 2 John Deere tractors, but I'll tell you about them in a minute. And they're good guys. I like those guys. I like all the dealers around here. They've all been pretty good to me. But when I got here, there was a John Deere tractor here that was part of the deal. And so I've always had a John Deere tractor. And then another one came up that was to my liking. It was a 1965, and it's very simple, and it had the horsepower that I needed for what I needed to do. And it was in my price range, like $6,500. So I was able to secure that one. So that's why I have 2 John Deere tractors. But I also have an Allis Chalmers as well. And I don't use it anymore because it's a 1946. I have chosen not to use it because it's a little, I don't have a use for it. So I might sell it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it exactly. I might just use it as a lawn ornament. It's actually probably more value to me that way than if I sold it for what I have into it in tires, because I don't think anybody would use that tractor. It's a skinny front end, and I don't know anybody that's a row cropper except for maybe Bryce, but he's got one. So anyway, if you get in your mind or set in your mind that I want to be self-sufficient, I want to be able to run a self-sufficient farm, then self-sufficiency means that you're not calling this repairman and this repairman and this repairman. And a friend of mine, back when I was in the service, Bob Reed, said to me that his grandfather felt as though he needs to know how everything on that farm works. And now this is 10 years before I would be even out of the military. And who would have ever thought that I would be a full-time farmer? I did not know that. That was something that kind of came. It was my density. It was actually my density. You're my density. It was my density. And I had something to do with it. I stepped forward, but the opportunities came. So I have lived by that when I can since then. Now, if I buy a microwave, we don't have one now, but we did buy one. I didn't know what made that thing tick, and it broke, and it's still broke. But we decided we didn't want to use a microwave anymore. Anyway, let me shut this door. So now, to keep the operation streamlined, I want equipment that I stand a fair chance, at least a fair chance, of having an opportunity to fix it. That's what I am working towards, when I have to buy some new equipment. Now, I have a Heston hay mower, and I'm not exactly sure of the date of the manufacture on that. I've been meaning to look into it, but I think it's somewhere around 70. I can't be sure, though. I really can't be sure. It could be a lot earlier than that. It's hard for me to know just by looking at it. I don't see any other around being used, and I didn't pay very much for this one. And at the time I bought it, I didn't have the opportunity to pay much for it because that's all I had. And then when we got it home, we used it for a year, and then I had a breakdown on it. And it was a pretty good breakdown. It was the sickle bar broke, and so I had to find a new one. And luckily I found one, and it was in Iowa, and it got sent to me, and it was $210, I think, at the time. And it was brand new. It had been manufactured way, way back, and it was wrapped in cosmoline. You guys know what that is. It's sort of a really thick grease. And I had to assemble it. I had to put the knives on it and get it assembled and get it installed. And when I did, now I got a brand new sickle bar on there. So boy, did it cut then. It really cut until I hit my first rock. And then I broke a section. It's a section off. It's a knife section. And then I had to pull it out and put a new section on, right? And then I'd go a little longer. Like every year I knock guards off. They're this assembly that sits in front of the sickle bar, and it's there in case you hit a rock that it will push it out of the way before the sickle bar hits it. But it never fails. There's always something that you don't see, and you hit it, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 and then you're coming back to the shop with it. And to be honest with you, I hope I'm being honest the whole time. That's kind of a weird thing that people say, and I just said it. But if I brought it back to the shop and I've got a section that's broke and maybe a guard that's broke and need to be replaced, and I couldn't do it. If I could not do that myself, I really don't know who I would call to come out and fix that. Like, I can go through the listing and I don't see any Heston dealers anywhere within a million miles of here. And I don't really think they have a guy at the shop that'll jump in a vehicle and come out here and change it for me. And if he did, that repair, I would reckon, would be an extremely expensive repair. Not that it's a complex repair. It's 2 bolts. Put a new one on and put the bolts back in. But to get a guy to break away from the shop that he works in to come out here and do it, yeah, he'll do it, but it's got to be worth his while. And the part to go on there, like the guard, I think they're $17 the last time I bought them, and I bought like 10 extras because they were on the shelf at Tractor Supply, right? And I want extras because I'm keeping this haybine. I love this haybine. You know, I'll paint this haybine. I'm building a lean-to on my hay barn that I can put that haybine under, so it's not out in the weather. It's not getting rained on and snowed on and everything else, because that extends, right? It extends the life of it, you know. If I can baby it, I want to do that. So yeah, so you wanna think like that. You don't want to be thinking, "Oh, I'd never want to be seen out in the field with this thing. My neighbors will think I'm a Neanderthal." I don't. That doesn't mean anything to me. It means absolutely nothing to me, really. I actually feel better about it that I've got a piece of equipment that's older, and like Gary said, he was able to get the parts from the hardware store. So there used to be a time when everybody was using those mowers, and you could get parts for them were very common. You use chains, you use knife sections, you use pulleys, you use gears. Um, what else is on there? Zerk fittings, grease fittings, bearings, um, belts. And a lot of those parts for my Heston is right on the shelf at Tractor Supply, and we have another store in Cadillac, Farm and Fleet, right? So here's my routine. Let's say I have to go in Farm and Fleet and it's January, right? I'm definitely not cutting hay in January, but I always cruise that section, and there's a chain. That chain fits my hay bine. It's mine. I take it, I put it in my basket. And then if anybody gets near my basket, I'm like, hey, get away from it. Get away from my chain. And then I bring it home and I put it up on the shelf. And I think, you know, I've got a spare chain for my haybine, you know, or sections. I have probably 20 sections. And I even have a toolbox, an old toolbox, World War II toolbox, that I found at a thrift store a long, long time ago, and I think I gave $2 for it. It's a big one. It's steel. It doesn't shed water, so it actually brings water in. You can't leave it out in the rain. So I didn't want to use it as a toolbox because I filled it with water a couple of times and said, the heck with that. I'm not going to use it. So I use it as a parts box for my haybine, my baler, and my hay rake. So when I'm going to start my haying, which I need to be starting next week, but I'm not. The weather is not cooperating with me. That toolbox goes in my service vehicle. Could be the back of my motorcycle. I have a milk crate on the back there that's bungee strapped on. And if I have a problem, the chances are really good that I have what I need with me. I've got extra sections. I've got a socket set in there that fits. I've got everything that I need to fix the most common breakages. So I'm not stuck. I don't have to stop and run into Cadillac and get a part. I don't want to have to do that, because when you're cutting hay, for instance, and you're looking at the weather report, and it's like you're going to have 4 days of good weather, good hay cutting weather here, but then 100% chance of rain. So I'm up against the clock with this. I really can't afford to have a breakdown that's going to hang me up for 2 weeks, because if I do, like with the sickle bar, when that went, I was pooched. I had hay on the ground that I had cut, and I couldn't continue cutting. So what I did was I raked that hay and I baled that hay, and then I waited for my part. to come in, and then I started over again. And I didn't get in a lot of trouble with that. I have had trouble cutting hay, and I'll tell you a horror story. It was terrible. I'm watching the weather report. I'm a farmer. That's what I do. I check it every morning, every single morning, because I want to see a pattern, you know. And on this particular year, it wasn't last year, it was the year before, and the hay was thick. It was thick. It was Allen thick. And I went out there and I cut, and I laid down a bunch of hay. And I'm thinking, I better not lay down anymore. I better get this taken care of. But then I was like, nah, no guts, no glory. Keep going. So I laid it all down on this particular field that's 20 acres. And then the weatherman lied. The next day, it got rained on. Or no, wait. No. When you're haying, you cut it, you put it in rows, and then you let it dry as much as you can. So you need days that are warm. And then you flip it over with a hay rake. You flip it to the other side, right? And then you let it dry there for a while. And then sometimes if it's real hot, you can flip it in the morning and you can bale it in the afternoon. And when that happens, woohoo, we got a long day. But once the hay is baled, let it rain, let it rain. And it's very important to get your hay in, because I have animals that are depending on that to get through the winter. So I'm prepping. I'm doing my preparation work. I'm prepping for the winter. I'm a doomsday prepper, and doomsday's coming when it gets cold here and the snow is up to your thighs, and you don't have hay. You're going to have angry cows, and that gets ugly too. It just gets uglier and uglier and uglier, right? So cutting hay is really important to me, to get it done and get it done right. I got a helper now. I got Frank. He's a good helper on haying. And I have 2 tractors, which is good. There was a time when I only had 1 tractor, and that it was just tough. But I had to do it, so I did it and got it done, and we got through it. So that in mind, I am geared towards repair of equipment. I am geared to that. I want to know that I've got the parts I have, and also I'm going to take care of that equipment the best I can, which means keeping it inside, making sure that it's not resting on the ground or anything like that, getting it off the ground. If it has to be outside, I can't do anything about that if I don't have the buildings to put it in, but I do the best I can. And then during the winter, I'm looking at it. I'm making sure that, something hasn't happened. If a tire has blown out, let's say somebody hit it with something, I need to know that before the day I go out there to jump on it and go out and cut. I want to keep up on that equipment. I want to make sure it's serviceable. And you learn this in the aviation business, because people are going on long airplane rides, and they're depending on that airplane to work as advertised to get them home safe. And when that doesn't happen, that's not good, because people die. Business that I'm in now, people don't die, but I didn't finish my horror story. I got the hay flipped over, and it was dried, just about ready to go, just about ready. And I'm thinking, tomorrow this is going to be primo to get this stuff baled up. It rained during the night. Oh, not good. The hay was dry. Now it's wet. That's not good. You can work it, but hopefully it's not too much rain. But this was a lot of rain, and it got completely soaked. When I went out there, it was wet all the way down. So all I can do is wait, dry, let it dry again, and then flip it again, which that's not good, because you're beating the hay up. You're losing a lot of the leaf. And then try it again. And I did that, got it flipped. It rained again on it. The weatherman was wrong. I was calling down there like, who's doing this? Somebody's got to pay for this. But they didn't respond to my phone calls, right? So it wasn't my fault. It was the weatherman's fault. And then it didn't dry after that. It kept raining. And finally, I got to the point where when I went out there and I would pick through it, it was literally like, literally, it was like lettuce that's in the rotter. You know, they call it the crisper, but it's actually the rotter. That's where you put lettuce to let it rot. And it was never going to dry. It was not. If it did dry, it would just be like, it would just crush. It would just dustify. It was not going to be hay. So I had like 15 acres of that, and it was all in rows. And then it's like, now what? I have no experience with this. I don't know what to do. I am too embarrassed to go to my neighbor and say, what do I do? Of course, he's already driven by and said, Mark's got a problem. I wonder if he's going to come and ask me what to do. Well, I didn't. But I went out there and I looked at it and I thought, I'm just going to put the bucket down at the end of the windrow and I'm going to push towards the woods and see what happens. Like, I've got tons of wet seaweed out there in the field, and I'm thinking, well, how do I rectify this? I mean, I'm not going to be able to bale it. How do I get it off the field? Am I going to be out there with a pitchfork and a wagon trying to get it off? But I put the bucket down and I just skimmed and I just pushed it. And I started, and sure enough, it's building up in front of the bucket. It's building up, building up. This would be a windrow that's probably 500 feet long. And it keeps building, and I'm keep pushing, and it keeps staying out in front of me. We make it to the woods, and I lift it up a little bit and push it over. And there's this mountain, just one row. There is a mountain of seaweed out there, right on the side of the field, just into the scrub, not the woods, actually, just the scrub, where we don't cut, where I can't cut. It's too wet in there. And there's too much brush and stuff. I can't. Plus, there's an easement against it. So, and then I went to the next row, and there was probably 40 of them. And I pushed it, and it went. And I went to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And it took me 3 hours to do that. Had to go fill with diesel again. And but when I was done, it was all off the field. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the barn where it should be. It was sitting off the field, and there it was going to sit. And if you come here now, this is 3 years ago, it's still there. Like, nobody was interested in it at all. Like, there was no animal that would pick through it, or any of the worms. I guess the worms did take it down. So the piles are not as big as they were. The piles were literally 6, 7, 8 feet high, pointed, like it looked like a sawtooth of these piles. My neighbors never said anything to me. They figured I was probably embarrassed enough using old equipment, right? But they never said anything to me. My neighbors have been really good to me. The boat or the Van Dries have been really good to me. I think it was the year after that I panicked because the hay was so thick that my hay bine wouldn't cut it, and the tractor that I had kept bogging down and then plugging and bogging down and plugging, and I panicked. And I went to my neighbor and I said, "Can you cut this for me? Because I'm in a bad way here." I couldn't see where the ditches were. It was so thick. And I just panicked. Here I am, a grown man, and I actually panicked. And he said, "Yeah, we'll cut it for you, like on shares." So they took half of it. And it was nothing to them. They've got big equipment, and they're good guys, and they did it. And but I only got half the hay, and it put me in a bad position as well, for the next. So live and learn, and who knows what can happen this year. I'm not going to say right here that it's going to go smooth, but I'm going to do everything I can to keep it smooth, right? But the whole spirit of repair, you have to think that way. And I think I want to bring it to your attention. There is another aspect of this too. If you adopt the mindset of repair, that you are willing to repair, you're willing to get better at it, you're willing to accumulate the equipment that you need to do repairs, then you are going to be ahead of the next guy. And this is it's not a race to the bottom. It isn't. It's a race into, I shouldn't say it's a race. It's a journey into prosperity. It really is. And the place where we live, where we all live, planet Earth, is a very abundant place. We get fooled into thinking that it isn't. And I'll give you a really good example. Really good example when we get fooled into thinking that it isn't an abundant place. If I guess I'll use what would be a good example? Oh, let's stay with the Jeep example. All right, the Jeep example. So I use my Jeep. I have a 1957 CJ5 Jeep. It was like an M38, but it was the civilian version of it. So it doesn't have a lot of things that the military ones have. It's actually got cooler things on it than the military one would have. The military was way stripped down. And I've told the story before, but I purchased this when I was in Montana. I was stationed out in Montana. It's my last duty assignment. Somebody else wanted the plow that was on there. I didn't want the plow. Didn't snow much where I was in Montana. I wasn't really into Jeeps at the time. And I didn't think I needed it. But anyway, I inquired about it, and the man that owned it, it was at a bar. It was at the Spot Bar. If you ever make it to Great Falls, Montana, that's where it was, right outside the main gate. And I had driven past it for probably 5 years. It was sitting there on 3 flat tires with a plow on it. And a friend of mine wanted it. And he said, stop and see if the guy will sell it. So I did. The guy says, well, I don't know. I'll have to ask my wife. And, on and on it went. And I asked him again, and he says, yeah, but I don't want to part it. Oh, so I got to buy the Jeep too? He's like, yeah, I don't want to part it out. Well, I only really want the plow. And he says, well, I'm not going to part it. I said, all right, well, what do you want for both of them? And he says, make me an offer. And I thought, here's my chance to get out of this deal. I will lowball him, and he'll say no, and that'll be the end of it. My friend will have to deal with him himself, which is what should have happened in the first place. So I offered him $500 for the whole thing. And he says, okay. So I got a Jeep and the plow. The plow was worth $500. So I paid him. And then a friend of mine hauled it. Let's see, how did that work? He hauled it home for me. He had a trailer and he hauled it to my house. And we pulled it off. I really was interested in getting the plow, and I was going to give it to this guy and say the guy wanted $500 for it. And then I would have this Jeep, which the seats weren't in it, had no battery, the tires were flat, and they were terrible tires. It was full of junk, beer cans, and all kinds of stuff was in it. So anyway, we stripped the plow off of it, and I gave it to my friend. And I said, he was a pastor friend of mine, actually. So I said, you know what? Just take it. He said, you sure? And I said, yeah, I wound up getting this Jeep, and the Jeep's probably worth what I paid for it. And I can just flip it, and we'll just call it good. And he's like, all right, cool. He was a good friend of mine. Still a good friend of mine. Love the guy. And so I had this Jeep, and I put a battery in it, 6-volt battery that I had for my Allis Chalmers tractor. And put some gas down the carburetor and cranked it, and that sucker started. So we drained the oil, put new oil in it. Didn't have any brakes. Bolted, cleaned it out, put air in the tires, and then we started driving it around our little farm in Montana, and having a good time with it. The kids loved it. The kids just loved it. It was the coolest thing, and it looked cool. And all of a sudden, I started liking Jeeps. Before that, I had said I don't really like Jeeps. I don't know why I didn't like Jeeps, but I mean, I didn't hate them. I just didn't really love them. Now I love them. I love Jeeps. They always catch my eye now. I would like to have a fleet of Jeeps. I love Jeeps, especially this Jeep. And that Jeep came to Michigan with us, and for a couple years we drove it in the summertime just for fun. And then we started doing things here, fencing, running chicken tractors, and just about all kinds of stuff. We was just doing a lot of things that require moving around, moving bodies to places with equipment in the back, hammers and staples and rolls of fencing wire and things like that. And I can't drive a big pickup truck out there. My pickup truck is a 3/4 ton and it's heavy. And I buried it in the back, and my neighbor had to come, Jack Ventry had to come with his big tractor and get me out. And there's still ruts down there from that. I keep saying I'm going to fix them, but everybody knows where they are, and I haven't fixed them. And anyway, and that's 10 years ago. So this little Jeep, it's got 4-wheel drive, and it's light, very, very light. I can put lots of equipment in the back of it. I can have kids in the back of it. I can have Jill next to me. The windshield folds down. It starts all the time. It doesn't burn hardly any fuel, and it gets us where we want to go. I mean, I'm not going to drive it to town the way it is. It doesn't have any paperwork on it. It's not registered or anything, so I can't legally drive it to town, although I do sometimes. Not Cadillac. I've driven it back from Cadillac when it was at Spears getting a new clutch in it. But that little vehicle has made money for me. And what I mean by that is we've able to use it as though it was a tool to do all kinds of things. I did fencing with it this spring when it was too wet to be on the field with a motorcycle, but I could float out there with the Jeep and do minimal damage and get all my equipment out there that I have to have if you're gonna fence. It's way too far to carry it, way too far. You couldn't do that, even with a wheelbarrow. It's just too far. You could, I suppose. A horse and wagon would be impossible because the horses would sink in too far and do too much damage. So, yeah, and David Duncan is saying this. He says that Jeep is better than a 40,000 side-by-side. So those new things that they're putting out now, those side-by-sides, the Polaris, and John Deere makes them, and I don't know if John Deere makes them, but there's a bunch of companies that make them. And yeah, they're expensive. I didn't know they were 40,000. I mean, because I don't even look at them. Why would I? I got a Jeep, and my Jeep has gotten a new clutch. I've taken it to Spears Auto and Cadillac. I've given them a shameless plug. I outsource a lot of my maintenance to them. Yeah, can I put a clutch in the Jeep? I can, but they can do it, and they can do it quick. They have the jacks, the transmission jacks. They got the lift. They got all that stuff there. And John comes and picks it up, and then he brings it back, and then I pay him. And he does it, and it helps his business, and it helps my business because I don't want to be tied up with a big job like that, like a clutch job. Not really that big on a Jeep, but if they're doing it and they break a bolt, they're right there next to the auto parts store. They can get a new bolt or a U joint or whatever. They're they're specialists in that, and they can make it happen much more efficiently than I can. So I made the decision at one point, and this is about the time that I met John Spears, and he put in a maintenance facility in Cadillac, that I am going to outsource my maintenance to him on vehicles. I'm going to do that because if I'm going to continue to maintain my vehicles, I need a lift, and a lift is a couple $1,000, and you got to have a place to put it, and you're tying up a spot with a lift that you might not use for 2 years. So I said, I'll outsource it to him. I want him around, so I want to give him business and, all that. So I made that decision to outsource heavy maintenance to him on vehicles. And he's done work on all my vehicles. Every one of my vehicles I've taken to him, and he does it, and I get it back, and it works. They can actually fix stuff. And if it doesn't, I'll take it back. He'll come pick it up and get it. He's bound and determined to do good work for his customers. And I hope you become his customers too. And we want to keep him around. He's done. So here's my fleet. Here's my fleet of vehicles that I make this operation run with. I have a 1994 2155 John Deere, 55 horsepower diesel tractor. And John's never done anything on that. I got a 1965 John Deere 2020 54 horse gasoline tractor, and he's never done anything on that because I did have a problem with that. But it wasn't something that I think the automotive guys would know how to do that efficiently. So I outsourced that to another guy that does tractor work around here that is quite specialized. His name is Mike Myers, actually. So he's outstanding, and he came and picked it up and took it to his shop and did what he had to do on it. Then I have a 1966 2-ton dump truck, Chevrolet C60 dump truck that I bought in Montana, and it's kind of my daily driver. It's what I use if I got to go someplace, because my next truck is a 1974 F-250 Ford 4-wheel drive, and I use that for plowing, and that's about it. That's about what I use it for. And my wife does not like me driving downtown with that because it is a absolute chick magnet, and so she doesn't like it when I wheel out the driveway with that. So it's not plated. I just use it on the farm for plowing, which is, if I can't plow, with the snow we have here, I'm dead in the water. You can't move around when you get 2 feet of snow. And if you get another 10 inches on top of it, and then 10 on top of that, and then a foot on top of that, you are dead in the water. You're not moving around. And we can't have that. We have to move around in the wintertime. So we have to move hay around to the animals, and so forth. We have to move firewood. We have to function, So it's essential that I have a plow truck. Otherwise, I got to call somebody, and they can come in and plow for me, and then give me a bill for $150 for plowing. I can do it with my tractor, and I do sometimes, but then it's cold. I can if I have to. And then I have my 1957 CJ5 Jeep that I do a lot of work with in the summertime. It's got a seal on the transmission that's gone right now, and John's going to come and get that, and he's going to do his magic on it. And while he's got it, I'm going to say, would you please do an oil change? And would you put a new carburetor on it? And would you see to these headlights? They don't seem to be working, And then it comes back, and then I've got a whole summer's worth of use out of it, and it's paid for. It's old, but so what? So what? The thing's a little older than me. That doesn't merely make it old. I'm perfectly serviceable. Yeah, I won't go there. I know what you're thinking, but it ain't my fault. Um, and then I have a like a 2000 Kawasaki 250cc enduro motorcycle. So it's got a headlight on it and a tail light, so I can take it on the road. But more importantly, if I gotta move around and I gotta see where I'm going at night, I can see where I'm going. So it's really good. I use that just about every single day, you know. And in the farming business, I may not see my cows when I come out in the morning because they're out doing their thing, eating. But I want to lay eyes on them. I want to make sure they're all up, that nobody's tangled up in anything. So the motorcycle, I can get out there, and it's economical, it's nimble, it's, you know, fun. And then when I do my checks at the end of the night, I can make sure, okay, these guys got water, these guys got water, everything's good. So when I turn that motorcycle off, I know everything is uptight, right? Because I'm the top guy here. That is absolutely my responsibility to make sure it's uptight. So the motorcycle, if I didn't have that, I would have to use the Jeep, and I would have to be rolling close to things and be out in hay fields. And I don't want to do that kind of damage to the hay fields. I'd rather be either on foot or on a motorcycle, and, you know, the motorcycle's it. And the motorcycle, it's the same type of motorcycle that we used in the Air Force. Ours were slightly different, but they were Kawasaki KLR. These ones were a little smaller than the one that I have, and now they make them bigger with a diesel engine in them. So I don't need one of those. I like gasoline. And yeah, it will be the last motorcycle that I probably will get of that grade. You know, at some point I might get I don't know. I'm not supposed to be having street bikes because I tell my kids I don't want them on street bikes. So I have stayed away from that, but I really like street bikes. You can get killed in a hurry or dismembered, especially in the north where people aren't used to seeing motorcycles. But you know, coming out of winter, they're just not used to seeing them, and that's when you have problems. There's a guy killed over here on the highway on a motorcycle, and yeah, so I kind of am staying away from that. But the point is, I have all of this equipment to run this operation, and I'm not making payments. I own it outright. And you may think that, well, if you had, let's say you had a $40,000 tractor that you buy. That's not much of a tractor, you guys. I'm here to tell you, with a front end loader, it really isn't. It's used. It's used. You're looking more higher than that. And I don't have that. None of us have $40,000 in cash to drop on a tractor. No, nobody's got. Well, I mean, some people do, but not in my circle of influence. They don't. Maybe they do. Maybe there's people out there in my circle that I don't know that have that kind of money to drop on it. I don't, and I wouldn't anyway. Honestly, I wouldn't. $40,000, let's say, to drop that on a side by side or a tractor or anything like that. That $40,000 can go into equipment and processes that you would be investing that money in your own operation. But if it's tied up in vehicles, if that money is tied up in vehicles, then you can't use it in your operation. So what are you going to do? Borrow more money to dump into your operation? That's not smart. You know, you get to the point. Had an appointment today with a lawyer over some estate planning type stuff. You know, you got to do that at a certain point in your life, right? And she was lamenting that she's kind of stuck where she's at, kind of stuck. and she was probably maybe 40, and got student loans. So she doesn't really like what she's doing, and she don't have a choice. She's got the the golden bracelet around her leg that she's got to continue to do that, and somebody else gets to raise her child, and you can see the pain in that statement. So you can get yourself in a bad way with this farming operation, and do what you want, but this is what has worked for me. So we're at the point right now where we're going to invest in a whole nother operation. I don't know if I should tell you this. Well, I will, because I'm kind of excited about it. But right now, because the economy is not doing real good, that's not what you hear on CNN, I guess. They're saying, oh, everything's fine. Vote Joe Biden, vote for Biden. But yeah, the man van was a great van there, Dave. It was a great asset to me. I love that van. It was a Toyota van, and you could fold down all the seats, and I could have all my stuff in there. I could stretch out in there if I wanted to take a nap. It was awesome. Good on fuel, had an air conditioner in it. It wasn't really what I would want to take cross country with my family, because we wanted something. We wanted something else, right? And I wanted to get a different car for my wife, right? So, and the man van, it had been wrecked, and I didn't want to do the repairs to the body and stuff, but it was okay for me. Yeah, but then somebody that we know had a car accident. A girl that we know had a car accident. She was down on her luck, and she didn't have no money, so we gave it to her, and it was the right thing to do. But I missed that van, and now we're down to one vehicle for the road. But that's all right. It's all right, because me and Jill can share a car. She doesn't mind, and it's okay for now. If I have to go someplace and she does, I have the 2-ton I can drive. I have my motorcycle I can drive. I do drive it on the road. It's not plated, but I do anyway. So anyway, the man van went down the road. Yeah. Kind of pains me sometimes, because she took it to somebody other than John Spears. John Spears had been taking care of it, and it was in good shape. I just put tires on it, just did the brakes, and the transmission had a leak, so it would get low about every couple of years. And when you hit the peak of the driveway, it would slip a little bit, but I knew what it was. And if she had taken it to Spears, he would have just topped it off, but she took it someplace else, and they told her, oh, your transmission's gone. Yeah, Toyota transmission, behind a V6 is gone. Right. But anyway, he convinced her it was shot, and the thing's totaled. To put a tranny in it would cost more than the vehicle. Yep. So that was the name of that tune. That's what pains me about that. It wouldn't pain me so much if she was still driving it around, but she let him just take it. And then she went and got a payment on what? A 3/4 ton pickup. Yep. 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive pickup. Yeah, I'm not big on that. Because it's way too much vehicle for transporting you around, just getting you to work and getting to the store and back. Way too much vehicle. I'm not into that. I think it's not a good thing. But anyway, that's the way that went. So that's what I have for vehicles. And it really gets me ahead of the game, because my capital is freed up. And, we're able to continually expand the farm, because our capital isn't tied up. So we're working on a project right now, just to kind of round it out, where we're expanding our butchering capability, and the parts to do that, I'm scrounging them. Like, I got telephone poles off Keith, and to put the drain lines in the milk house, Keith like, hey, do you need some PVC pipe? Like, I sure do. So he laid 5 pieces on me. I took it home. It's in the ground right now being used. I was able to, I had to get ends and fittings and stuff for it, but saved me a hoop of money. I mean, hoop of money. So that's scrounging. And Keith's one of my scrounging buddies. He comes across lots of good stuff. But I have beef. So we do a little swapping now and again. The new process that's coming is we built a campground next door. And it was just a question of mowing and then building picnic tables. And we utilized it at Tribe Day, and then off and on, people come and stay, pull their campers in and stay for a day, 2. Sometimes if you're the Balkers, you stay for 3 weeks, which we didn't mind at all. I wish they'd come back and stay another 3 weeks. Really miss those guys. But right now, because the economy is rough, people are not utilizing their camper trailers. So you can get a nice 24, 26 foot camper. Some of them might be over 10 years old, but you can get into them we saw one the other day for $2,000 that was pristine. I mean, the guy had a cover for it, but he says, I'm not using it anymore. I just want it out of my way. And we missed it by that much, but we're going to pick those up, and we're not going to worry about licensing them or title work or anything like that. We're just going to tow them here, set them up at the campground, and then put them on Airbnb, and rent them out. So people that are working in the area or just traveling through or whatever, just want the Baker's Green Acres experience, they can rent it. And then we go in, run a mop around, change the bed, and dust, dump the toilet, and it's good to go. You can rent it out for another evening, another night, right? So we're going to do that because me and Jill stayed in one down at Lake Odessa when we went to that farm conference. We stayed in, it's kind of a raggedy fifth wheel. It was kind of raggedy, but it was clean. They took good care of it. And it had lawn chairs. We sat in the lawn chairs right on the side of a river, watched the geese go by. We even went swimming in the river, did our cold plunge in the river the first day. But the second day, I didn't want to do it because the mud. I was walking in the mud and I was sinking up to my knees. That doesn't worry me, but I cannot afford a deep cut on my foot at this point. And who knows what's in there? I don't know what's in there. And I only had one pair of shoes with me. So I did it one day, but the next day I said, I'm not going to take that risk. I'm just not going to do it. Jill did, but she didn't sink as deep as me, and she's got wider feet. She's like a duck. So that's my thing for tonight. Adopt a repair mindset. Build your tools. Learn how to do body work. Learn rust prevention. That's a big one. Corrosion. It's called corrosion control. And in the Air Force, we painted everything. We just painted. You have equipment that has bare metal on it. It's not going out the door until it's got paint on it. Inspection wants paint on everything. On the aircraft, it's a little different. They have different standards, but on like ground equipment and trucks and bomb lifts and stands, maintenance stands, paint. We put paint on everything. Does it look cool? That's not the point. We're moving towards serviceability. Is it going to work? Can I get the task done? Yes. What do I care what it looks like? What do I care? If it looks cool, that's cool. I'll appreciate it. But if it doesn't look cool and it gets the job done, that's cool. I'm good. I'm good with that, right? Because I'm interested in mission completion. If our mission is to cut hay for the year and we're doing it with hay bine that doesn't have a perfect paint job on it, it doesn't matter. The cows don't care how you did it. They just care that you have it. All right. Yeah, David says, good talk. I hope some young folks were listening. Well, they'll hear it. They'll hear it. And you guys can help me with this. You can share these videos. Like, they go on the Baker's Green Acres YouTube. And, you know, that would help the mission if you shared it with your whole group of people. And then they would hear what we're saying, and they would get into the whole anyone can farm experience and, you know, learn these disciplines, because we didn't get these disciplines passed down to us from our parents. A lot of us, I mean, most of us didn't, because our parents weren't farming, because there was a huge break in farming from the end of World War II until now. You know, it's been taken care of by just a small group of people that are using super heavy metal and chemicals, right? And we kind of see where that's going. Do we see where that's going? I hope you see where that's going. It's not going in a good direction. A little update. It's just a sidebar update on the bird flu. I'm to a place right now where I have alerted those who need to know how to deal with state regulators that think that they're going to regulate farms that are not regulatable. All right, we have a rock solid defense against that. They have no authority on private property if we are not regulatable, which means we're not in a contract with them. We're not in a licensing contract or a permitting process with them. So they have no authority on our property, and we're going to keep them off. The bird flu that's coming, people at real high levels are saying, and I've heard them say it, Dr. Birx, remember the scarf lady? She was always at Tony Fauci's right hand. She's come out and said, we need to test every cow in the United States. And she's trying to get people to say, yeah, we better, because, you know, bird flu. And if they want to do that on the factory farms, and the factory farms are probably in a place where they can't say no, because they've ingratiated themselves with like the USDA and MDA and all that by way of taking funds, they're going to have to deal with it. Now, what's the end goal of the Tony Fauci's of this world? I know what it was last time. We're going to get a shot in every arm. I know that was his goal. And he, sad to say, he got 75% of you. That's their numbers. 75% of you gave in to the offer, because it was an offer. Like, I didn't. I said no. And if they had the wherewithal to make me, I'm sure they would have, right? That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted. They wanted 100%. No, you're not putting it in me, not without me kicking and screaming a little bit, or a lot, or anybody in my family didn't want it. Most of them. So I'm not going to participate in this bird flu thing. And I think the way you want to start looking at this is with the same repair mentality. All right. These guys are really into creating problems. They create a problem. They use the media to get your reaction. You know, the media is going to, you know, Rachel Madcow will be out there saying, oh no, look at how bad this is. People could die. And if you don't believe it, you're a racist, right? Or a climate denier, or an anti-vaxxer. They'll just try and pester you until you believe, okay, I don't want to be called a racist because I won't take a shot. And you capitulate to them. If they could make you, they wouldn't have to shame you into it. But let them shame you. Who cares? But don't let them put vaccines in your cows. Don't let them regulate you. You don't have to give in to that offer. So that is that's a component of this, is to know how to operate independently from them. You have the right to do that under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and don't listen to any of their BS. Matter of fact, don't get in conversations with them. when they throw out an offer to you, we're offering to come and test all of your cows. No thanks. And then when they want to keep talking to you that, well, if you don't, you're jeopardizing every cow in this county. How do you feel by jeopardizing your neighbors? Don't even get in a conversation like that. Just don't talk to them. Don't give them the opportunity to talk to you, because it's always drivel coming out of their mouths. They never help us, right? So why are they going to help us now, right? But then the other component of this is, if they can get the mRNA vaccine into like the factory farm cows, and mothers, just average mothers, 40-year-old moms, go to buy milk and they know that it might have it or it might not. We don't know. Their hand is going to pull back from that, and they're going to say, I think I'll go to Baker's and get milk from them. Yeah, it's more expensive, but I know that it's more wholesome for my children. And once they take that plunge into the farm buying and they see the way the animals are raised, they interface with us, they see my children, they're going to be all in. And that's a mother's job, is to protect her children. And so, like, we're at 5 cows right now, and I've told you guys, yeah, I'd like to be at 10 cows. That's good. That's good stuff right there. I think this is going to drive them to us. And so we're going to use the effort that they are putting out to stop us from doing what we're doing to actually propel us into success. So that's the next part of it. I have no guarantees that it's going to work, but I know that the last time we went through this, where they were trying to say, you can't have those pigs, and we figured out a way to put a covering over us so they couldn't get at us, and we didn't have to listen to what they said, our sales of Mangalitsa pigs went through the roof. And now Mangalitsa pigs are everywhere in the United States. If we had failed in that, or we had capitulated to them, you wouldn't be able to find a Mangalitsa in the United States, or probably any pigs on the land in Michigan. And Michigan is like one of those states that loves these things. Like, they have even come out and said, Michigan is ground zero for the bird flu. Why? Because we've got 2 migratory workers that had red eyes and a runny nose. So we're ground zero. We're on the front lines, they say, the front lines of this deadly disease. Come on. I could be wrong, but if I'm wrong, we will know. You will know. You won't, like the way it is with the Wu flu. You got some people say, that was made up. That didn't even exist. It was just a flu, right? But then I talked to a man today, blue collar guy, a little older than me. Yeah, I had COVID. He's convinced he had COVID. He says, I still can't smell really good. So there's still, like, in my mind, I think it was all a bunch of hooey. I got some symptoms, but I've gotten the flu before too. So I didn't jump to the place where, am I going to die from this? I better do my will, No, my head wasn't in the game. And I had some symptoms, but it could have been anything. And it didn't last very long. And part of me would forget about it during the day as I was going about my business. And then I'd get to the end of the day and, like, is this it? Is this as sick as I'm going to get? I got sicker than this when I went on the carnivore diet on day 4. I had to lay down. I was that sick. So what I'm saying is, if the bird flu is real, you will know. You will know. So in this state, there was a farm that had to depopulate all their laying hens because one or several of the chickens tested positive for bird flu. Well, how'd you test them? Oh, that same thing that we've been sticking up your nose, we stuck it down their throat. And yeah, they came back positive. Well, how many people do you know came back positive with that PCR test? And I feel fine. Well, that's asymptomatic, we call that. But you got it. When have we ever seen anything like that? That sounds a little fishy to me. Yeah, but we're dealing with bat flu stew, so this is dangerous. And then the media was showing Chinese people keeling over in the streets. I don't know what that was all about, honestly. I don't. I don't recall seeing that here in the United States until people were taking the you know what antidote. And then they seem to be falling out all over the place. Soccer fields, all over the place, they're falling out. Comedy stages, news anchors, C-SPAN people just keeling over, you know. There was this one where this nurse was briefing people on the procedure of it. And she, oh, absolutely, I took my vaccine, and da-da-da, she's going on, and all of a sudden she just poof, keels over. Yep, not good. So I'm not believing them at this point. If it's real, we'll know. But if it goes like the last one, that chicken barn that they depopulated down there, because they killed all those chickens, does that mean they had it? We killed 1 million chickens. They must have had it. Maybe you wanted a new flock of chickens and your insurance was going to cover it. So you said, oh, what the hell? I don't care. Yeah, kill them. Maybe. Could it be? It's if there's any nebulousness and if there's any room for human foul play, I'm flagging it, especially with the people that are involved in this. I've already seen where they're pushing. They've got a vaccine. They've got a new vaccine that they want to put in all poultry and in all cows. Now, how does a bird flu vaccine? How is that in milk? You know, that's quite a jump, right, to get to milk. How is that? And you're not getting sick from working around birds. You're getting sick from when you milk cows. And it's not in pasteurized milk. It's only in raw milk. It's only in raw milk. So if that's true, then when these semis are going down the road full of raw milk, shouldn't that be like a hazmat thing? You know, if they were to go off the road and wind up in a lake or a river or the water table, couldn't that infect everybody with bird flu? They should have an armed escort, I would think. You know, the state police ought to be out there, you know, making sure that it doesn't go off the road, because now so I think it's BS, and I think it's just going to blow over if we just put that cocoon around you, let it go over. But it's sort of like you beat them with success. You just concentrate on success in your raw milk business, which I think is going to be driven to you. So that's my word to the wise. Let's see. Ghost. I think China was in cahoots with the rest of the COVID thing. Had to be. Chinese. I don't know. Whenever the U.S. government is doing something, like they blame Osama bin Laden. Osama did it. You know, it's always blame people that can't say, you know, you blame the Chinese. Who's the spokesman for China saying, hey, we didn't do that? I don't know. I've heard that it came from within. And my gut tells me it probably did, because you look at who benefited from it, you know? Okay, Keith is saying, I have parts for a lawnmower that I just part out and use for my rider. All right. What's the new process? It's the Operation travel trailer campers. And if it works, if we can prove it, if we get one and we put it out there and it works, then we will go into the repair business and we will buy ones that need repair, and we'll have the knowledge of how to repair them, how to bring them up to serviceability. I don't mind if they're scuffed and worn. They just need to be clean and look presentable if somebody's going to stay in it, right? All right. That's all we have for tonight. I'm going to say goodbye. Do we have a consulting call tomorrow night? I'm going to have to ask Jill. I don't remember where we are in the rotation. We did last week because we wanted to talk about the bird flu with the other producers and just get our thoughts out there and hear their thoughts. So we did that. I don't think we're going to do it again. It doesn't seem like it'll serve any purpose. Everybody knows what they're going to do. And some people will capitulate to them. They just will. That it always happens. And they're going to have to live with the end thing. If you have a license through the state of Michigan, you're going to have to capitulate, or they're going to take your license. And maybe that'd be the best thing. If you tell them, if they say, we want to test your cattle, and you say, no, thank you. Oh, we'll have to take your license. Then here it is. You can have it. I'm going to operate on there is, whether you realize it or not, a bright line. Licensed people and non-licensed people. And when you say non-licensed, it's almost like, oh, you're rogue. No. I can operate without a license. All right. I don't have a midwifery license, yet I have delivered babies, and I'm pretty darn good at it. Right. I don't have a carpentry. I'm not a licensed carpenter, but I do carpentry all the time, and I'm getting good at that. I'm not a licensed plumber. I'm not a licensed electrician. I'm not a licensed veterinarian, but I do that type of work on my stuff, on my thing. Now, I probably couldn't set up a shop and say non-licensed veterinarian. I probably could. I mean, what are they going to do? Like if my neighbor has a problem with an animal and says, hey, what do I need to do? Like this happens on the tribe all the time. People have a problem with an animal and they put it out there to the group. My animal is doing this, this, and this. What do I do? And people are chiming in with the solution to the problem. They're not veterinarians. Can they do that operating without a license? Freedom of speech. Of course you can. Yeah, I could go on, but I'm going to get an end to this, and we will. I believe we are in the rotation for tomorrow night. So all you Tribe Plus members that want to come to the Zoom meeting, by all means, you'll get a code at some point to get on the Zoom meeting. If you are not a Tribe Plus member and you would like to be one, follow the links in the Anyone Can Farm experience or bakersgreenacres.com and sign up for Tribe Plus, and you will be privileged enough to sit on a consulting call where you can ask me questions. And there's a lot of other expertise in there too, of things that I don't know about. But I really do know everything at this point. Just ask me. Okay, Anyone Can Farm.